The moment that changed everything didn't happen when the joke landed. It happened when my wife smiled. I stood there with a champagne glass warming in my hand, watching her lips curve just enough to show approval. Not shock, not embarrassment, not anger. Approval. That was the twist. That was when the room stopped feeling crowded and started feeling exposed. Before we go any further, if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, hit subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us we're not alone. That I've never been a dramatic guy. I don't raise my voice. I don't slam doors. I observe, I file things away, and I act when it matters. That night, at my wife's firm's holiday party, I did exactly that, at least on the outside. The event was textbook corporate theater. Rented ballroom, dim lights, a band that played safe covers, an open bar that promised premium and delivered close enough. The associates clustered together, laughing a little too loudly, networking a little too desperately. Everyone was performing a version of success. My wife, Sarah, insisted I come this year. Said it would mean a lot. She wore a navy dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. Hair perfect, confidence effortless. Watching her work a room had always been one of my favorite things. That night, it felt unfamiliar, like watching a rerun where the dialogue had been subtly changed. That I spotted her near the stage with Jason Miller, one of the younger partners. Early 30s. Sharp haircut. That polished confidence that comes from never missing a step. They stood close. Too close for colleagues. Close enough to notice if you were looking. I noticed, and told myself it meant nothing. That I made my way over, shaking hands with people whose names I wouldn't remember tomorrow. Sarah introduced me with her usual line. "This is my husband, Michael. He runs a small business." Small. That word again. Jason's handshake was firm but lazy, like he expected to win by default. "Nice to finally meet you," he said. "Sarah talks about you all the time." I smiled. "Funny. She hardly mentions you." Just a flicker. That's all it took. The first crack. The night dragged. Speeches. Awards. Applause on cue. I watched Sarah glow in that environment. And for a moment, I remembered why I fell in love with her. How ambition looked beautiful when it was shared. Then Jason stood up for a toast. He'd had enough drinks to feel invincible. His voice cut through the room, confident, playful, careless. He talked about the real builders, about sacrifice, about long hours. Then he raised his glass toward Sarah. "And here's to the husbands at home," he said, grinning, "who keep the lights on while we take their wives to the next level." Laughter burst out. Not everyone, but enough that I didn't move. I didn't blink. I watched Sarah. She didn't laugh. She didn't object. She smiled, a controlled, professional smile, the kind that says this is fine. That was when I gently set my glass down. The sound was sharper than I expected. A few heads turned. Sarah didn't look at me. Not once. I waited. For a signal. An eye roll. A word. Anything. Nothing came to s. Oh, I did what I've always done when the truth shows itself. I left no scene. No goodbye. Just cold night air and silence that felt cleaner than anything inside that room. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. A text from Sarah. "Where did you go?" I didn't answer. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, replaying details I'd ignored for months. Late nights. Weekend work. The way she described my life like a footnote. None of it felt dramatic anymore. It felt organized. Neat. Intentional. I drove home without music, letting the road do the talking. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always had. Quiet. Orderly. Familiar. But something had shifted, and I knew, without anger, without panic, that things were no longer what I thought they were. I poured a drink, stood alone in the kitchen, and looked around like I was seeing it for the first time. That smile kept replaying in my mind. And for the first time in years, everything felt painfully clear. Saturday morning came quietly, the kind of quiet that feels intentional. I woke before the alarm, before Sarah stirred beside me, and lay there staring at the ceiling fan as it traced the same slow circle over and over. My head wasn't racing. That was the strange part. No anger, no panic, just a calm awareness that something fundamental had shifted. That I got out of bed without waking her and went downstairs. The house smelled faintly of last night's perfume and stale champagne, a mix that didn't sit right with me. I made coffee, black, and stood at the counter while it brewed, listening to the soft hum of the machine and the distant sound of traffic outside. Ordinary sounds. A not ordinary morning. Sarah's tablet was on the kitchen counter, plugged in, screen dark. She never bothered locking it. She'd always said we had nothing to hide. I stood there longer than I needed to, telling myself I was just tired, just overthinking. Then I picked it up. The screen lit instantly. I didn't go looking for anything specific. That's what I told myself. I opened the messaging app because it was already there, already open. Jason's name was near the top. Not first, but close enough to notice. The earliest messages were harmless. Work-related. Deadlines. Client notes. Then the tone shifted, gradually enough that you might miss it if you weren't paying attention. A joke here. A complaint there. Long days. Feeling underappreciated. Lines that blurred without ever announcing themselves. I scrolled. She doesn't even notice when I stay late anymore. Sarah had written months earlier. Jason replied. That's because you're carrying everyone. Some people don't see what's right in front of them. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt oddly detached, like I was reading about strangers. I kept going. The messages weren't explicit. No photos. No declarations. But there was intimacy in the way they spoke. Familiarity that didn't belong to me anymore. I took screenshots. One. Then another. Not in a rush. Methodical. By the time I heard footsteps upstairs, I had a neat folder of moments that told a very clear story. Without saying too much, I put the tablet back exactly where it had been and poured myself another cup of coffee. Sarah came down 20 minutes later, already dressed, hair perfect, voice light. I have to go into the office for a few hours, she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Prep work. On a Saturday? I asked, evenly. That's how it is sometimes, she replied, grabbing her purse. Will you be here? Where else would I go? She paused, studying my face, searching for something. Whatever she was looking for, she didn't find it. I'll be back by 3. The door closed behind her. I waited a full minute, then opened my phone and checked our location sharing. Her car wasn't heading downtown. It was heading toward Jason's neighborhood. I sat down at the table, folded my hands, and let that settle. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of quiet efficiency. I made calls. I wrote notes. I asked questions I should have asked a long time ago. No raised voices. No drama. Just information moving from one place to another. When Sarah came home that afternoon, she looked relaxed. Too relaxed. She dropped her purse and asked if I'd eaten. I told her I'd been reading. She didn't like that answer. Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. Anything interesting? She asked. Work stuff? I said. You know how it is. That night, we moved around each other carefully, like people sharing a space they no longer owned together. She tried to act normal. I stayed polite, distant, focused. Every time she walked past my office, I closed my laptop. Let her wonder. Sunday morning, she finally asked if I was upset about Friday. I didn't look up when I answered. I asked her if she thought the joke was funny. She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any argument ever could. That I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply stated what I'd seen and how it felt. She retreated without a word. Later, I heard her on the phone, voice low. It didn't matter who she was talking to. That night, lying awake in the dark, I realized something important. The party hadn't embarrassed me. The joke hadn't broken anything. It had revealed it, and once something is revealed, you can't unsee it. Monday morning didn't feel heavy. That surprised me. I woke before the alarm again, but this time there was purpose in it. I dressed carefully, choosing a suit I hadn't worn in years. Not flashy, just precise. The kind of suit you wear when you want to be taken seriously without asking for it. I left the house while Sarah was still asleep, the quiet between us thick but unspoken. The drive was familiar, yet different. Same streets, same traffic lights, but my mind wasn't wandering the way it used to. I wasn't replaying arguments or second-guessing conversations. I was focused, calm, almost detached. That kind of clarity doesn't come often, and when it does, you either respect it or you waste it. I wasn't about to waste it. I parked across the street from the law firm's building and sat there for a moment, watching people filter inside. Associates clutching coffee cups, staff greeting each other with practiced smiles. A system running smoothly, unaware of what was about to brush up against it. Sarah's car wasn't there yet. She usually arrived later. I noted that without emotion. Inside, the receptionist looked up, surprised. I gave my name and said I had an early meeting. She checked her screen, nodded, and directed me upstairs. Conference room. Neutral walls. Polished table. Two men already seated. Robert Hayes and Daniel Brooks, senior partners. Decision makers that we exchanged handshakes. Polite. Professional. What can we do for you? Robert asked that I didn't rush. I placed a folder on the table and looked at both of them. I want to talk about something that happened at your firm's holiday event, I said. And I want to talk about my business relationship with you. Daniel leaned forward slightly. I'm listening. So I told them. No theatrics. No embellishment. I described the toast, the laughter, the silence afterward. I didn't mention feelings. I didn't need to. The facts carried enough weight on their own. When I finished, the room stayed quiet for a beat longer than necessary. That's unacceptable, Daniel said finally. We had no idea. I'm sure you didn't, I replied. That's part of the problem. I slid the folder across the table. Invoices. Contracts. Numbers laid out cleanly. They flipped through the pages, eyes scanning totals. I watched their expressions change. Not panic, not fear, but recognition. This represents a significant portion of our revenue, Robert said carefully. Yes, I agreed. It does. I leaned back slightly, keeping my voice level. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to set a boundary. One of your partners publicly disrespected me at a firm event. That reflects on your organization. I need to know how you intend to handle that. They exchanged a look. Daniel spoke first. We'll address it internally. That won't be enough, I said. Silence again. Thicker this time. Robert adjusted his glasses. What exactly are you asking for? I'm not asking, I replied. I'm explaining. I will not continue a professional relationship with a firm that tolerates that kind of behavior. What you do with that information is up to you. They understood. I could see it. Not because I raised my voice or made threats, but because I didn't need to. I stood, gathered my folder, and thanked them for their time. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A missed call from Sarah. I didn't check the voicemail. Back in my car, I exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not triumph. Just steadiness. The rest of the morning unfolded without drama. Meetings. Calls. Work that needed doing. At some point, my phone started buzzing again. Text this time. Short. Urgent. Confused. I didn't respond. Around midday, a message came through from an unknown number. Can we talk? I recognized the tone immediately. Not apologetic. Alarmed. I turned the phone face down and went back to my work. That afternoon, I noticed something else had changed. I wasn't bracing myself anymore. I wasn't preparing defenses or rehearsing explanations. Whatever was coming, I was ready to meet it on my terms. And for the first time since that party, I understood something clearly. Control doesn't come from forcing outcomes. It comes from knowing exactly where you stand and refusing to move from it. By the time I left the office that evening, the sky had already darkened, the kind of early twilight that makes everything feel unfinished. I drove home slower than usual, not because I was tired, but because I didn't feel like rushing toward anything anymore. Whatever waited for me, there could wait a few more minutes, as Sarah's car was already in the driveway when I pulled in. That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how calm I felt walking up to the front door. No tight chest, no racing thoughts, just a steady awareness of where things stood, She met me in the kitchen before I could set my keys down. Her arms were crossed, posture rigid, eyes searching my face like she was trying to read a language she suddenly didn't understand. "What did you do today?" she asked. That I took off my jacket slowly and hung it over the chair. "I went to work." "Don't do that," she snapped. "Don't pretend you don't know what I mean." I poured myself a glass of water and took a sip before answering. "People make assumptions," I said. "That's not my responsibility." Her expression shifted, from irritation to something closer to fear. "Jason was let go," she said. "Effective immediately. No warning. No explanation. Do you have any idea what people are saying?" I looked at her then. Really looked. "People always talk," I replied. "You know that better than anyone." She stepped closer. "They're looking at me like I had something to do with it. Like I crossed a line." I nodded once. "Did you?" Her mouth opened, then closed. That hesitation again. The same one from Sunday. From Friday night. "This is ruining my career," she said finally. "Everything I've worked for." "Your career seems very important to you," I said quietly. She stared at me, realizing too late what I was pointing at. "That's not fair." "I didn't say it was," I replied. "I said it was important to you." She accused me of overreacting, of making things worse, of humiliating her. The words came fast, layered with frustration and disbelief. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. When she finally ran out of steam, the room felt empty. I read the messages. I said. Her face went still. Color drained from it, as if someone had turned down a dimmer switch. "You went through my things. You left them open," I replied. "I read what was there." "That's a violation," she said quickly, anger flaring like a shield. "So is pretending your husband doesn't exist when it's convenient," I said. "So is letting someone mock him publicly and smiling through it." She looked away, toward the window, toward anywhere but me. "It wasn't like that," she said. "It wasn't physical. It was just talking." "Talking builds things," I said. "So does silence." That landed harder than anything else I'd said. She sank into a chair, rubbing her temples, suddenly smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "I believe you," I said. And I meant it. But intent doesn't erase impact. We stood there, surrounded by the life we'd built, now feeling like a set we'd outgrown. I realized then that I wasn't angry. Anger wants repair. Anger wants resolution. What I felt was acceptance. "I need some space," I said. She looked up sharply. "From me?" "Yes." "For how long?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. She wanted to keep talking, to explain, to negotiate. I didn't. Not because I was punishing her, but because I finally understood that clarity doesn't come from endless discussion. It comes from stepping back far enough to see the whole picture. I packed a bag that night. Nothing dramatic, just essentials. Clothes, laptop, a few personal things. She watched from the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, saying nothing. As I walked out, she asked one last question. "Is this really happening?" I paused at the door. "It already did," I said. The drive away felt strange. Not triumphant, not tragic, just necessary. And as the city lights blurred past, one thought stayed with me, steady and undeniable. Some endings don't arrive with noise. They arrive with certainty. The first morning after I left, I woke up in a quiet hotel room just outside the city. The curtains were thin, letting in early light, and for a moment I didn't recognize where I was. Then it came back, not with a jolt, but like a settled fact. I wasn't home, and for the first time in a long while, that didn't feel wrong. I showered, dressed, and stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. The man looking back at me seemed steadier. Older, maybe, but clearer. There was no knot of dread, no rehearsed conversations running through my head, just a sense of forward motion. Work filled the day the way it always had, except now it felt cleaner. Meetings were efficient. Decisions came easily. Numbers made sense. When you remove uncertainty from one part of your life, it stops bleeding into the others. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd been spending managing silence, reading between lines, pretending not to notice patterns that were obvious in hindsight, and my phone stayed mostly quiet. A few missed calls, a handful of messages I didn't open. Not out of spite, out of choice. I wasn't ready to hear explanations designed to make everything feel softer than it really was. That afternoon, I met with an attorney recommended by someone I trusted. No theatrics, no raised voices, just paperwork, timelines, and facts. It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. When I walked out of that office, the weight I'd been carrying for years felt lighter, like I'd finally set something down without realizing how heavy it had been. Days turned into weeks. I moved into a furnished apartment closer to work. Simple place, clean lines, quiet nights. I cooked for myself again. Took walks without checking the time. Slept through the night. The noise in my head faded. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard fragments. Jason was gone. Sarah was on leave. Rumors moved faster than truth, but I didn't correct anyone. It wasn't my job to manage narratives anymore. When the divorce papers were served, I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. Some moments don't require an audience. The calls came after, many of them. I listened to none. Silence isn't avoidance when it's intentional. It's a boundary. The legal process moved exactly the way it was supposed to. Clean documentation has a way of cutting through emotion. There were attempts to negotiate, to reframe, to reopen conversations I'd already closed. I declined all of it politely and consistently. A few months later, the final hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. The judge reviewed the documents, nodded, and signed. That was it. No speech. No gavel slam. Just an ending that felt appropriately quiet. That I drove home. Not to the old house, but to the new one I'd bought shortly after. Smaller. Brighter. Entirely mine. I stood in the doorway for a moment before going inside, taking it in. The space felt honest. Uncomplicated. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. It became mine. Work continued to grow. Friendships deepened. Evenings slowed down. I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's approval or ambition. I didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. Months later, I ran into Sarah at a professional event. We exchanged a brief nod. Nothing more. No bitterness. No nostalgia. Just recognition, and then separation. That's how you know something is truly finished. Looking back, the joke at that party wasn't the betrayal. The smile was. The silence was. The slow erosion of respect that happens when you keep accepting less than you deserve. That here's what I learned. Respect isn't negotiated. It's demonstrated. And the moment someone shows you they don't have it for you, believe them. You don't argue. You don't beg. You don't explain your value. You step away, and you build a life that no longer requires their permission. That if this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Your support keeps these stories coming, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next one.